Good morning and welcome to Recruitment and Retention in a Disconnected World. We are super excited to be presenting today to the Congressional Fire Services Institute. Today's session goals will cover how to design a recruitment and retention program with little to no budget. We'll explore the use of social media for recruitment and retention. We'll look at how to build local and statewide campaigns. We'll talk about ways to identify and find the best pool of candidates. And we'll also explore how to leverage community collaborations and partnerships to help your recruitment and retention efforts. We are super excited to be here to share with you today. And we have a great panel of experts. I'm going to allow our friend from the first state to jump in and introduce himself. Go ahead, Mr. Warren Jones.
Thank you very much, Candice. My name is Warren Jones. I'm the Executive Manager of the Delaware Volunteer Firefighters Association, and I'm a firefighter with the Rehoboth Beach Volunteer Fire Company.
Thank you, Warren, for being here. And we'll move over to Mr. Dave Lewis.
Thank you, Candice, and thank each of you for joining us today. My name is David Lewis, and I'm honored to serve as a volunteer firefighter for just short of 50 years now with the Odin Volunteer Fire Company in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. I've had the pleasure of serving as president of the Anne Arundel County Volunteer Firefighters Association and the Maryland State Firemen Association. Today, I'm representing the National Volunteer Fire Council, where I serve as one of two state directors for Maryland on the National Volunteer Fire Council. I dedicate my presence today here to Ms. Heather Schaefer, who served as executive director of the NVFC for 27 years. Ms. Schaefer recently passed away, and her loss is being felt throughout our organization for many years to come. God bless you, Heather, and we'll carry your mission forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Heather will definitely be missed. She was loved by so many of us and made such an impact on the volunteer fire service. So thank you, Dave. Now we'll move over to my good friend, John D'Alessandro from the great state of New York.
As Candice said, I'm John D'Alessandro, and I'm happy to be participating in this very important discussion. I serve as the association secretary for the Firemen's Association of the State of New York, and also have the title of Volunteer Programs Coordinator. In my spare time, I'm a commissioner in the Half Moon Waterford Fire District in Saratoga County, New York, and am still an active interior volunteer firefighter.
Well, thank you. Thank you, John, for being here. And I'll be your panel facilitator today. My name is Dr. Candice McDonald, and I represent the Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firemen's Association. I'm the second vice president for that organization. I've been in the fire service for almost 20 years now. It's gone pretty quick. I've served as a structural firefighter, EMS officer, fire inspector, and PIO. So I'm super excited to be here. I'm super excited to be with all of you and talk about this topic today. So recruitment and retention is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. That was the focus of my doctoral dissertation. So it's exciting to be here with all of you and to hear what's happening in your state and with your organizations and how we can pass that knowledge on. All right, so today we're going to look at identifying the best pool of volunteer candidates. You know, we know that is key for preventing turnover. We know that the cost of turnover is significant, and it's a huge issue for the U.S. Volunteer Fire Service. On average, the annual cost of turnover, it costs us about $30,000 when we look at the cost to outfit a firefighter and to train firefighters. But what we need to remember is that cost is even higher, because as we lose people, it has an impact on our organization's institutional knowledge. It impacts morale. It impacts the psychological makeup of our department. So it's important that we take a look at that. Volunteer firefighters donate approximately $139.8 billion per year worth of time each year. Think about how much of a savings that is for our communities. But sadly, what we know is that in general, only 1/3 of all volunteers make the commitment to serve with an organization from year to year. Only 1/3. So it's important that we talk about this issue and figure out how we can recruit, retain, and keep those volunteers, because they're such an investment. And we know with social distancing and COVID that it's created some new challenges for us, getting some of that face-to-face time with potential recruits and for allowing them to get to know us and for us to get to know them. So we're going to kind of explore that. And I'm going to start with Warren. You know, Warren, and looking at examining how you select candidates within your organization. What methods have you found helpful to weed out candidates? And have you had to shift any of those methods due to COVID?
Let me start off with how we weed out the candidates first. And I want to speak in particularly to the Rehoboth Beach Volunteer Fire Company, since it's recruitment's a local issue. We do, first of all, when we receive an application, within 24 to 72 hours, we are contacting the person. As soon as we contact them, we set up a meeting, a face-to-face meeting with just two people. Usually it's the lead membership committee chairman at each station and the possible mentor for the person. We bring them up to the station, we give them a tour, and then we sit down and go over what we call an explanation and expectations sheet that we put together. That sheet includes our mentoring program, what the physical requirements are of being a firefighter, what time they have to spend in training, what their time commitment is, what their probationary period is. We talk about PPE and we talk about responding to calls. Once we complete that initial face-to-face, we get a feeling for the person. We ask them, how they heard about us, why they want to join, and so on. Then when that session's over, we give them the handout. We would take it home, read it, show it to your family, go over it. If you're interested, then give us a call back and we'll set up the formal interview. So the second process after they call back is the formal interview. We go through a canned list of questions that we asked every applicant. Among those are what skills they could bring to their role, how many hours they available a week, what their feeling is about policy changes, whether they have any felonies, misdemeanors, driver's offenses, education, prior fire service experience, if they have it, other volunteer experience, whether they've been in the military, and then we go through like a doctor's office of physical questions. We want to make sure that the person understands what their responsibilities are with us and what the time commitment is with us. Once that's done, the panel votes on whether to proceed to the next step. If the panel agrees, then we give them a copy of their state background check, which is free in the state of Delaware, by the way. And they take that to SBI to get the background check in. We require a copy of their driver's records. But we really want to emphasize that we've had 42 applications in the last 2 years in our company, and 12 of them have not went to step 2. After we finished step 1, they realized that, hey, this is just not for me, and they don't continue to go on, which is the purpose of doing step 1.
So what I hear you saying, Warren, is that it's important to get to know the candidate and allow the candidate to get to know you. So Dave, from your perspective, how can departments ensure that they're not just getting enough candidates, but the most qualified candidates as new volunteers?
Great question, Candice. Volunteers represent nearly 70% of America's firefighters. And as you said, they save taxpayers in excess of $140 billion every year. However, it is well known that in many areas, the number of volunteers is declining, and those that remain are reaching an age where their personal safety becomes a concern. I just spent a week last week reviewing SAFER applications and looking at some of the recruitment retention ones. And there's some departments, in rural areas where, they've only got 8-10 members and the average age is over 50. And so we have to look at that. Really what we need to do is implement an active recruitment program to target those in what we call the 18 to 35-year-old range to assume their responsibilities for that operational mission performance. NVFC research determined that in many communities, the residents don't even know that their local fire station is staffed by volunteers. And if they do, they're not aware that the department needs volunteer members. So where do we start? The first place to start is the department needs to conduct a needs assessment of the type of volunteers that they need. How many firefighters do they need? How many EMS personnel do they need? How many administrative support members do they need? How about technical support for fix the computer when the computer breaks down? And what you need to do is that you need to have a clear position description for those type of members. We are volunteers, but in effect, it is a job. So there should be a clear position description for each of those types of members. And what do we expect them to do? What training and skills will they need in order to perform that? And I ask, when was the last time that you had a discussion with your own neighbors or your friends about volunteer opportunities in your department? I don't want to be a firefighter. Well, okay, we have jobs besides just being a firefighter. And so when we bring in those new members, it's clear we have that position description, and we need, and I think Warren went into some of that, we make it clear what our expectations are. But just as important, we have to understand what their expectations are, because they come in there. And so we have to look at those two spheres, the expectations that we have and expectations that they have, and address any gaps that are in there to make sure that everybody is singing from the same script of music.
Yeah, absolutely. Expectations are so important on both ends. Our volunteers need to know what they're getting into, and we need to be able to clearly communicate what it is that we want from them. And so we're going to move over to John. John, you come from a gigantic state. So you've got this giant geographical size, and you've got a lot of cultural diversity in New York. So how do you establish a candidate review process that matches what your departments need? And how do you weed out those bad candidates?
Well, you're absolutely right, Candice. We have close to 1,800 volunteer departments throughout New York. We go from, extremely suburban areas all the way up to very rural areas. We have pockets of, Middle Eastern communities, Spanish-speaking communities. So I think first and foremost, in addition to the great points that Warren and Dave made about expectations and having a defined process to bring people in and review them, we need to not overcomplicate the recruitment process. And by that I mean, as David said, the first thing we need to do is look internally and find out what type of person, what type of duties do we need. But I think the second thing we need to do is then do a community assessment. As firefighters, we're always taught, don't reinvent the wheel. You do what's been proven. Keep it firefighter simple. There are groups out there that we can coordinate our efforts with. I think one of the things that some departments don't realize or resist is that we're not just emergency response agencies anymore. We're often community service agencies. The Christmas parade, the delivering of toys, the Easter celebration does as much to get our presence out in the community as a focused, dedicated recruitment drive does. So, we have to be looking for opportunities at the local level, at the grassroots level. Again, you mentioned it's a big state. And what we try to do here at FASNY is teach people to go out at the grassroots level. You've got to find your populations out there. You've got to approach them, and you've got to bring them in your doors. Big statewide organizations like FASNY and the NVFC, we can set the high level tone. We can do the great media campaigns to get somebody's attention. But, the best we do is we get them to the firehouse door. You've got to seal the deal, bring them inside, and complete the process. So I think really we need to keep it simple. Your outreach efforts, the people that are doing these efforts should reflect the demographic of the communities that you're trying to go into. I mean, too often it's a small core group of people that have been giving of their time for recruitment and retention for years and years and years. But we've got to bring in, the people in the department that reflect the diversity of the community, and that means male, female, young, old, English speaking, Spanish speaking, because that's how you cement that community identity with the fire department.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points, John. I think that's so important. And we want the fire service to reflect the communities that we serve. So, when I conducted my study on firefighter retention, how we recruit was an emergent theme for firefighter retention. The research showed that we need to take a grassroots approach, which, John, you just talked about that, but that was so important for attracting the potential volunteer. It's important that we don't wait for them to come to us, but we go to them, we get out there. And the wonderful thing about a grassroots marketing approach is it's cost effective. It can be done with little to no budget. But we know that with COVID, we've kind of added this extra layer of difficulty with our recruitment efforts, and it's caused us to rely heavily on technology and social media campaigns and some other strategies. So let's spend a little time talking about grassroots efforts and what you guys are doing within your areas to kind of address that during COVID times. We'll start with you, Warren. What type of grassroots campaign do you run to attract candidates, especially now under COVID? What are you doing in Delaware?
COVID has been difficult for us. No open houses, no public meetings, no events. So we started thinking about what we could do. 2020 was an election year, as we all know, a well-publicized election year. and what did we see out there all the time? We saw campaign signs and campaign banners all over the place. So we decided to look at those type of things and say, look, if people are, if the candidates are communicating to the voters by that method, maybe we could use the same method to communicate ourselves. All of our stations were polling places. We put together a banner at each polling place saying, join now, volunteers needed, out in front of all the fire stations. And we actually bought 10 yard signs, just like the yard signs that the candidates stick alongside the highway, which also said join now. But that whole cost there was less than $300. Three signs for each station and the 10 yard signs. And also the other type of grass, we have a very good relationship with our local newspaper because we send them articles about fires and calls all the time. So we sent them an article, not an ad, but an article on a kickoff for our recruitment campaign. And we also sent them a picture. And in the picture, we made sure there were male and female firefighters. They were holding one of our recruitment signs that says join now. Some were in gear, some were in Class A uniforms, but we made it COVID related by everybody having masks on and things like that. And it worked out pretty successful. We got a couple new people to put out applications in and I said, how did you hear about us? And he says, well, the sign out front for one thing, but then I turned up the street and there's a yard sign sticking here staring me in the face. It says, join now, volunteers needed. So I thought that was inexpensive. It kind of covered what we needed to cover, and it turned out to be pretty successful for all the difficulties we've been experiencing with the COVID situation.
So what I heard you say, Warren, is you went to those natural events. You knew that the polling place was a natural event where people would be coming to vote, and you took advantage of that, which I think is a great thing. And Dave, in looking at grassroots efforts and turning to you, what resources does the NVFC offer to help departments build a recruitment program? And are these resources, are these things that can be used in times of social distancing?
And as Warren already alluded to, as well as yourself, in this time of COVID environment, those personal contacts are somewhat limited. So we got to look a little bit more to the printed media, the social media that maybe we shied away with. NVSC has expended considerable resources in a program that we call Make Me a Firefighter. Through Make Me a Firefighter, the departments can register their own volunteer needs by registering at portal.nvfc.org. Once a department registers an account in Make Me a Firefighter, they'll have access to a large collection of customizable ads and materials that we've generated through the Make Me a Firefighter program that can be easily used for recruitment needs. No cost to you. Download them, customize them, print them on your printer at the station, or take them to a copy and print service, whatever it needs to be. Portal.nvfc.org for the department to register. MakeMeAFirefighter.com for the public to look at. We've also recognized that in a lot of areas across the United States, and I've been to a few of these, either local departments or state associations, have a similar program to Make Me a Firefighter, where they do things collect those point of contacts at a state level rather than NVSC doing it. It doesn't mean you can't use the resources that we have. You still have access to the customizable materials from the portal, even if you choose not to register your needs and Make Me a Firefighter. Now, Make Me a Firefighter, we believe is a great resource to you. It's no cost to register. So talk about grassroots at low cost, there's no cost to you. Register your needs while you're there. Somebody might just poke into their zip code and find you as the local fire department looking for fire, EMS, admin, or other type resources.
Yeah, well, thank you, David. And I know one of the things that I like about the NVFC's resources is the templates are already built. The social media campaigns, the print ads, you can just plug your department's information and run with it. And John, I know you guys have done the same thing in New York. I know when I attended your conference, I think it was last year, you guys had this wonderful binder that you guys give your volunteer fire departments that have all those great resources in it, so that they can kind of hit the ground running. And so in looking at that, I know you guys kind of have tried to make it very easy and cost effective for your department. So is it necessary to have a significant recruitment budget to have a successful recruitment program? And, and looking at that, were there budget barriers tied to COVID that you guys had to overcome?
I really don't think it's necessary to have a large budget to have an effective recruitment program. Again, let's all sort of agree on the basic parameter that it's got to be done at the grassroots level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And just like firefighting, recruiting is a contact sport. Now, COVID has obviously made that a little more difficult, but really at the end of the day, lawn signs, banners on the stations, going out to community events, those are all low cost activities that just require some, sweat and elbow grease, and some members willing to give up a little bit of their time. I think sometimes we overcomplicate the whole recruiting process. And I think one of the other things that we have to realize and come to grips with, the volunteer fire service of today is not like it was 30, 40, or 50 years ago. Back then, most volunteer fire departments were sort of at the epicenter of social life in a community. You became a firefighter because your father and your uncles and your grandfather was a firefighter. That type of legacy recruiting, while it's, it's very beneficial, really doesn't happen to the level that it did years ago. So I think we have to all come to grips with, when the alarm goes off, we're not going to see 60 firefighters show up on the scene. And sometimes I think we're a little counterproductive to our recruiting efforts, because we go for, out of our frustration and need for finding new people, we start to go towards quantity and not quality. I always, when I do presentations, I always try to say, I'd rather have a dozen dedicated, committed men and women who are trained to respond to what their community needs than 60 people on a fire scene and, 35 of them are standing around. So yes, in the COVID era, we've had to become more creative. One of our big events here in New York every year is called Recruit New York. It's a statewide open house weekend where we encourage every volunteer fire department to open their doors in some shape or fashion. And you can imagine, we talked about diversity. You can imagine the diversity of how they all approach that. I mean, some do a full 2 days of demonstrations and barbecues. Others, just put the trucks out and put a few signs up. And, again, you have to gauge what works for your individual department at the local level. With COVID, obviously, a lot of these fire stations are not open. So what we've tried to do is kind of go digital this year. Instead of those hard resources of lawn signs and banners, we put together a disc, a CD, of showing departments how to do a digital open house. Do it online. But you have to remember, even if you do that, at some point, there's got to be a face-to-face meeting. As I mentioned before, state organization, the National Volunteer Fire Council, we can all do a great job in publicizing the need for men and women to become volunteer firefighters. But the deal will never be sealed except once they step inside the firehouse. So even in this COVID era, we have to remember that to, bring somebody from the street to the apparatus cab, we've got to meet them. We've got to talk to them. We've got to make that personal connection. I often like to say that we are volunteers, but in some respects, we're not like volunteer organizations elsewhere in the community. We're volunteers with a big V. What we do is dangerous. It takes a lot of our time for training and response. So that big V volunteer, we have to make that understood. And, we don't want, tons of people. We want the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, I know you guys have really geared up your Recruit New York weekend. I had the opportunity to participate in a webinar last week and talk about recruitment and retention with a lot of your departments. And I was excited to hear about the messaging and the disc, what you just talked about. Is that something that other fire departments across the country could reach out to you and get a copy of that?
Absolutely. Over the last several years, we've been very fortunate in that we've received multiple SAFER grants. So, when we got the first SAFER grant back in 2010, even though it was a significant amount of money, we realized that it really wasn't enough money to actually produce the hard assets, the banners, the pamphlets, the posters for 1,800 departments. So what we decided to do was to be sort of the epicenter of creativity. So we created the sort of statewide theme, and then we digitized everything and put it up on the website. Now we do that for our year-round campaign called Fire, Is There a Fire in You? And we also do that for Recruit New York. So we put those digital assets up there, and if departments are, fortunate enough to have the resources to download the files and take them to a local printer, by all means. Now, I do get inquiries, to your point, Candice, from organizations and even individual departments in other states, and I say go for it. Okay, we are all in this together. This is not a zero-sum game. I may lose a firefighter because they moved to another state, but you may gain that firefighter. And frankly, another part of this discussion needs to be that if I'm losing a firefighter because they're moving from New York to Delaware, I should be picking up the phone and calling the chief of the department in Delaware and saying, I'm sorry to lose Joe or Mary, but they were a great firefighter. Here's their contact information. Reach out to them. And I would hope that someday I'd get that reciprocal lead from somebody coming from Delaware to New York. So again, we tend to compartmentalize, but I think we need to approach recruitment and retention more like we approach emergency scenes. We can't get tunnel vision. We got to look at the full 360, and we got to rise to the challenges that's coming towards us. And that might mean adapting and changing.
Great point. I think it's so, you brought up a great point about us as we lose people, whether they be in our own state to another county or to another state, reaching out and saying, hey, I have a great firefighter I've invested in, and I'd like to make that connection for you, because, that continues to help our industry. And you talked about adapting, and we know so many organizations have feared technology and social media in the past. Many have failed to tap into the power of it for recruitment and retention. Even within my own organization, we've struggled pre-COVID. I struggled getting some of our seasoned members to embrace the idea of hybrid meetings to increase participation. But COVID has proved to us that it's effective, and that we can use social media to really, get our messages across, to connect, and some of those other technology features. So the question becomes, how do we develop effective social media communications to recruit and retain the volunteer or the potential volunteer? And Warren, we'll start with you. Can you kind of describe, what your state's doing with your social media campaign and how it works?
Sure. We use Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and our own website. Most of our fire companies, if not all of them, have their own websites. We figured that would give us a good coverage. In my own particular company, we have what we call a public information group. Under that group is the social media, is our PIOs, and our website and electronics folks. These three committees work for that group. Our social media group, we selected two of our younger people, one guy, one girl, who are very savvy as far as, I had a hard time figuring out to put pictures on Instagram, let alone anything else. So I had to depend on them to teach me, but that taught me that's where we need to go when we're talking about Instagram and TikTok and those kinds of things. Those are the people that need to run it for us. Those are the people who understand it for us. And those two they're both active firefighters. They both understand our company. They've both been in for a while. They're in their 20s, but they're very energetic and have some great ideas. You got to harness what their thoughts are, what their ideas are, and put them and allow them to do it. We certainly monitor what they're doing and what they're putting up and approve what they are. But those are the people that can deliver as far as social media is concerned. And that's, you're trying to target that age group anyway. So they're perfect for that. Like I said, we're excited. They do a great job for us. They're generating videos of our members. They're constantly putting things on Instagram and on the Facebook page. So it's important for us to be out in the community as much as possible. And these two are doing a great job. And in addition to our PIOs, every time one of our PIOs makes a public address, no matter what they're dealing with, whether they're talking about our response to COVID or what have you, they're always plugging in, we're a volunteer firefighter. They're always adding that little addition on to all their presentations, no matter where they go.
And
So
that's important, because that's the hook. That's the hook to get people to join. Here's the message. Here's what we're doing in the community. And by the way, we'd love to have you join our team. It's so important with every social media post, with every interaction, that we hook people back in. That's really key. So thank you, Warren. And Dave, what tips do you have for departments when it comes to using social media as a recruitment tool, and what can the NVFC do to help with that?
Another great question. And as we talked about here already, in today's COVID climate, our opportunities for that personal contact are limited. Necessarily, we got to find new ways to recruit new members. As I mentioned, our target audience is those in that 18 to 35-year-old range. But yet, our research shows that this is a largely untapped resource pool. And many of those people don't even know that their local volunteer fire department needs new members. But yet at the same time, this is a group of people that are often out looking for new opportunities to meet other people, to gain new experiences, whatnot. So our NVFC research shows that most of these people have an interest. They want to learn new people. They want to learn new skills, but they need that invitation. I think as Warren and John says, get them in the door. So they need that invitation to come in, learn what firefighting and EMS is about. So for many of them, it might even be the first stepping stone to a full-time opportunity. Yes, we hate to lose a volunteer to a career opportunity, but a lot of them still remain volunteers after they get hired on with a career department. But this also is the audience that spends a lot of their time on social media. And so using social media platforms is an opportunity to enhance our recruitment program. And when I say social media, I'm not just talking about websites. The younger people tell you, I don't never go to a website. That's old technology. That's for the old folks. It's what we in the technology world call a pull technology. In order to get anything from a website, you got to go looking for it. What you really need to do is look to push it technology, which is pushing it out to them. And that's the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, and the other stuff to push your message out to that target audience. And that way they receive your message without them asking for it. It's an interface opportunity for them. And so what we've done at MVSC, again, through the Make Me a Firefighter portal, we actually have some customizable templates already ready for social media that can be customized to generate social media messages. And who knows, you just might find that golden nugget out there waiting and looking for a new opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. And I want to point out that social media just isn't for the young people. My 84-year-old grandma is on Facebook nonstop, interacting and posting. And so you can reach across all demographics using social media. So it's important that we don't, that we remember that as we're reaching out, that it goes across all demographics. So John, in the 21st century, is social media the solution to our recruitment problem?
Well, first off, Dave keeps talking about those 18 to 35-year-olds, and I'm getting a little nervous here. I'm going to go lock my bunker gear up before they come and take it away. You know what? In this era, social media is extremely important, but let's not put too much importance on it. It's not the be-all, end-all. It is just a tool. And it's no more important a tool than, those community events, the parking the apparatus on a Saturday morning outside the big box store. Again, a lot of this is driven by the needs of the local department and the demographics of the local community. But just like firefighters, when we pull up an emergency scene, we don't leave certain tools, back at the station and not carry them on the apparatus. We try to prepare for any situation. So when you're looking in your communications toolbox, don't exclude any one thing because you think something else is the be all end all. Social media is very important in this day and age, but the key to social media is to make it relevant, to keep it fresh, and it's got to be fast paced. And this isn't necessarily an age thing, but when people go to a website or a Twitter feed or an Instagram feed, and they see, you go once and I see XYZ, and I go again and I see XYZ again, I might not go back that third time. So if you're going to get into this, whole social media element as a resource, you need to make the commitment. As Warren said, you need to have the people that understand it, But equally important is you need to have the people that are constantly updating things and putting new and fresh things on those sites, or else it's going to fall flat. And frankly, if you don't do it right, it could be counterproductive. So, keep your toolbox, your communications toolbox, as diverse as possible, but refresh everything. Don't assume that people out there, as I believe David said earlier, simple things that we overlook. Don't assume that people in your community even realize that it's a volunteer fire department, or if they realize that they actually need people. I know early in my career, I was fortunate. I had my own business running out of the house, so I could spend a lot of time at the fire station. Now, my department is in a somewhat suburban community. It was a rural community. It was in transition for a number of years. A lot of old-time families, I call them the 12 tribes of the community, and a lot of new people coming in bigger, sort of suburban developments. But I would spend time up at the firehouse, and I get a call from a person who was kind of a little upset, saying, I called the fire station 4 times and nobody picked up the phone. And you try to explain to them, well, sorry, ma'am or mister, we're volunteers. We don't stay here all day long. We come when there's a need to be here. And they're, a lot of them were absolutely astounded because they came from areas that had career departments. And they just assume that when they move to this new area, they see these, nice shiny trucks and hopefully a nice building. They just assume that, there's a crew of people in that building 24/7. So we can't take anything for granted, and we got to continuously go out and spread our message.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of touch on something that you said. I heard you say about diversifying our recruitment efforts. It can't be all social media. It can't be all this. It's got to be, we got to show up at those natural events. We got to build those partnerships. We got to continuously post. We got to keep I like what you said about constantly refreshing what we're doing, and we got to stay relevant. And I think it's important as we look at staying relevant, how do we leverage our community partnerships, our collaborations within the community? I've heard a lot about grassroots efforts, and Warren kind of talked about, some partnerships they had to get the signs in the voting precinct. So let's kind of look at that and how those community collaborations and partnerships can be beneficial for us. So Warren, when you're looking at Delaware and the different community groups within your community, what groups should fire departments target to partner with to help boost their recruitment efforts?
Speaking of targets, ours is 15 to 45, by the way. If I can get somebody that's 45 years old and keep them for 15, 20 years, I figure I'm ahead of the game.
I still don't meet it, Warren.
Pardon?
I still don't meet the demographic. I'm done.
Yeah,
I've got 2 months. I got 2 months to move to Delaware, Warren, before I'm going to be too old.
I got a feeling I'm past all of you, by the way. Even Dave. I got him beat age-wise. But anyway, back to the question. Who do you target? Well, first of all, how do you target? Well, we talked about that, but I think it's very important that we have a statewide recruitment website. It's not the normal Delaware Volunteer Firefighter Association website. It's a website specific to recruiting, and when that recruitment has all the information they would need, how to contact, who to contact, etc. So that's good. So who do you contact and where do you go? Unfortunately, we're in COVID, so let's go post-COVID. Let's talk about what's happening, and hopefully by the end of this year will be posted. So we have to look at places where these people would gather and go, whether it's churches, whether it's state fairs, whether it's community events. It's all those kinds of things, not social media, but as John mentioned, out in the public, taking your fire truck to wherever. And if it's a state fair, is a great place. We used to go to state fair every year. This year it was cut down dramatically because of COVID, but we generate a lot of information there, a lot of people, and a lot of contacts. You just can't go and set up a table though. You've got to have a banner or some type of backdrop or something that people could see. And don't put your table in front. Draw people into your booth. And then make sure, it's very important, make sure that you have the people working your table are trained. We train our firefighters how to fight fires. We should at least make sure our people working our recruitment booths are delivering the same message, and how to talk to them, what they're looking for, and so on. It's nice to get a whole bunch of people say, yeah, I'm interested. But when you get them, then you have to follow up. Follow-ups are very important. You know, when anybody goes to our recruitment website, they say they're interested, they hit send, it automatically goes to two people, the chairman of the recruitment committee and myself. And then we pass that off to the companies, but we also follow up with them after that. So that's very important. We're hoping that as things go along here, that when COVID gives us a chance to do all these things, civic groups are another great place. They love to have people come in and do presentations on fire prevention. So when you get them in there for that, don't forget the recruiting part of it too.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, those are great points. Some of those natural partners, those places in your community, the civic groups, all good stuff. So thank you, Warren, for sharing that. And Dave, I'm going to move to you. How can departments partner with local community groups to maximize the pool of potential volunteers?
And John, Warren, and I have all talked about some, great statewide or national programs. Those are all great, but recruitment and retention is a local challenge, and
Yes, it
and
is.
it's a it's an in your face opportunity, and so we have to look at it. But we also need to look at, and I think we've kind of talked about it. Social norms have changed a lot in the last 20 or more years. In past decades, communities were more tight knit, almost like a family. John talked about the 12 tribes. The citizens would group together for church, school activities, children's sports, and yes, even the local fire department. Today, society is a little bit different. A lot of our people work at some distance from their homes. They work multiple jobs. They find it difficult to devote any spare time outside the home. And quite honestly, in a lot of communities, people don't even know who their neighbors are. Interesting book by Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone talks about the challenges of living in a disconnected society where everyone lives separate lives from their neighbors, where it was common in the 60s and 70s for people to join a local bowling league to spend at least one night a week with friends and family. Today, bowling leagues are almost a thing of the past. A lot of bowling alleys actually have closed up. The one not too far from where I live is now a skating rink, actually. So we have to look at that. So that challenge exists in every one of our communities. Our other community organizations are struggling with the same problem as the fire service to recruit new members. A lot of community associations, Kiwanis clubs, things like that are very small in numbers from what they used to be. And so, but that's a good place for us to find an ally. The members of those organizations are probably the people most interested in giving back to their communities, and maybe they're just willing to share their time between more than one activity, and maybe they have some special skills that the fire department could use. But also through collaborative efforts, maybe we could put on a large-scale recruitment program. We used to have our annual fire prevention open house at Odenton every October. At the same time, our community associations are looking at how can they promote the other things in the community. People to help out with the scout groups, people help out the church groups, people understand the history of the community and everything. And so we actually came up with a concept that we now call Odenton Day. And so now that day in October is not just Odenton Fire Company doing their fire prevention efforts, but it's we open up our social hall. We put tables in there, of course, not in the COVID environment, but we put tables there, and all these scout groups and local church groups and all these things come together, and it's now a community-wide thing, and provides an opportunity for not only us to recruit members, but the community groups also to recruit that, maximize our capabilities by massive recruitment. So, what about, a single campaign looking for sports coaches, scout leaders, Sunday school assistants, firefighters, EMTs, all those positions all wrapped up in a single campaign? Whether it be an Odenton Day kind of thing, or whether it be a massive social media campaign. Think about it. It might work in your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great points. We've got to be creative, and in times of COVID, we got to look for those things. And, maybe there's massive vaccine clinics within your community. You could take that approach and put your signage at those vaccine clinics. And hey, by the way, we have this opportunity. So, we got to continue to think outside the box and find those opportunities to get in front of people. So John, I want to talk with you for a minute. So do you think the recruitment of volunteer first responders is more of a community issue or more of a specific agency issue?
I think in the past, to our detriment, we have looked at it as a specific agency issue. We sort of lament and complain that we don't have enough people or that we lose people. And I think that really hampers us. I think we need to have a new vision in this. We need to look at the problem from a different perspective. To me, it really is a community issue because, as I said earlier in this discussion, I think gone are the days where we're just an emergency response agency in your local volunteer department. We are a community organization. And maybe in some respects, that's hearkening back to what we were 100 years ago, that social entity at the heart of, smaller growing communities. Maybe we're coming full circle and we haven't yet realized that. I think we sit here and we talk about, how do we try to counteract this disconnected society? But how about this? Because we are volunteer firefighters, because we all of us who are in the fire service today are inherently social beings. We've joined this organization, and we've joined this organization that oftentimes could be a dangerous pursuit. How about canceling disconnected society, to use the current euphemism, and why don't we just make it a connected society? We can be, along with these other community groups, the core of reconnecting society. We have to go out there when they say, who do you want to go after? And we have those demographics, those age groups, this and that. Who we need to go after? Everyone. We need to go after everyone, plain and simple. Let's not, overcomplicate this problem. We can use anybody in the volunteer fire service, young, old, male, female, fat, skinny, pink, purple, green. It really doesn't matter. There's a job for everyone. And I think oftentimes that message gets lost when we go out and recruit because we're so concerned about, we need interior firefighters, we need exterior firefighters, we need fire police. Guess what? The person taking care of the books and the office work and making sure that the water is ordered on time is just as important as the people climbing on that truck and putting out a fire. So, I think we got to look a little more on connecting the various pieces in our community as opposed to just responding to the various disconnected pieces. And again, I think we all the answers we've been giving today, it kind of comes back to the same thing. You got to do it at the grassroots level, okay? The big organizations, we can catch people's attention. We can maybe sensitize them to the need. But at the end of the day, it's the local people putting in some elbow grease and sweat equity, going out into their communities and starting conversations with everyone. This sort of popular image that you've got to be this big, brawny male to be an interior firefighter. Candice, you're no better example of that. My daughter is an interior firefighter. She's, I don't mean this in a bad way, but she's tiny like you, but she's a great firefighter. She's probably a better firefighter than I'll ever be. So we got to get around these sort of, antiquated notions. There's a place for everyone. And that means in the apparatus as an interior firefighter or back in the station, in the office, taking care of the businesses that we all operate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. And I think what you said, we all bring a diverse set of skills to the table. And when we come together, we make a phenomenal team because the different skill sets that we bring. I wanted to touch real quick on what you said about going from a disconnected community society to being connected. I think that is so important. And when we look at COVID times, one of the things that we saw a year ago was the community stepping up. People, organizations finding gloves, masks, donating to healthcare providers. A year ago, everybody was wanting to be a part of the solution. So what does that tell us? That tells us that our community members, the people within our community, they have big hearts. They want to give, they want to make a difference. And so we need to remember that they're out there. We just have to present them with that opportunity. And I want to thank each and every single one of you for all of the expertise that you shared today. And now we're going to kind of move over and open things up for Q&A to all of our folks that are joining us virtually today. So thank you.